Hey everyone, how are y'all doing? I hope everybody had a good week and that you're managing to get a little relaxation in over the weekend, or that you got some relaxation in over the weekend if the new week has started by the time you get a chance to check this presentation out. So, I wanted to talk about this week is the two topics presented in our two different textbooks. What I've got is just kind of a brief lecture for you. And this lecture is actually pulled out of some heavier research that a colleague of mine did a few years back when I was in my doctoral program. And I'm going to post the full, ultra boring, densely packed doc student version of the presentation also, so that you can check that out. That won't have the audio, and it's a little definitely denser, longer, has a lot more information. But for those of you who want to dig a little deeper, it's a great resource. So, uh, back to the focus of this presentation, uh, we had the two different authors investigating the therapeutic relationship on the one hand, and then the therapeutic, and then characteristics inherent in therapists that are effective on the other hand, with Corey looking at the therapists, I believe, in Cormier and Hackey. Am I saying that right? Cormier and Hackey um, looking at the relationship itself. So these ideas are definitely consistent with what I talked to you guys about a couple weeks ago, or I guess last week, um, and they articulate some of those ideas a little bit further. And the basic message is really fleshing out what an effective therapeutic relationship looks like and how a therapeutic relationship can be effective. So, the term that's often given to the therapeutic relationship, another term, is the working alliance. And that's been defined as a collaborative effort involving equal contributions from the consumer or client and the counselor based on an attachment bond as well as a shared commitment to the goals and tasks of counseling. So, if we actually step back and uh, take a look at that definition, um, there's a lot going on there, right? I mean, that's a lot of words to describe something that, on one level, looks pretty simple. Um, and to accomplish all of the tasks implied by that definition, I think it's fair to say that we can see that care needs to be taken, that trust needs to be established, and that we really can create a space that the folks we're working with create a space for them that they can come to and they could feel safe doing the work that they need to do. And I mentioned this in the last lecture. The largest portion of outcome variance, setting aside the presenting condition of the consumer, right? I mean, someone with schizophrenia uh, is going to have a much different outcome than someone with mild depression. Uh, so the best therapeutic alliance isn't going to overcome that. But setting aside uh, presenting conditions, um, the therapeutic alliance is the biggest determinant of uh, outcome success. And this is something that's accepted by experienced therapists everywhere. So this isn't a revolutionary idea either on my part or on the part of our authors. So what makes therapeutic alliance, a working alliance, effective? Well, when clients are asked what was most helpful in their psychotherapy, uh, they routinely point to the therapeutic alliance, and they indicate that it is the alliance themselves, that itself, that determine the success of their relationship across many different types of therapy. So to answer my question, uh, listening to clients, um, and this makes sense, right? Clients are going to be able to give us the best account of what's going on with them. We also will find, if we listen to our clients, that most of the time they're going to be in the best position to figure out how to help themselves. They don't necessarily know that when they come for counseling, but hopefully they can find that out through the counseling process. So, listening to clients, privileging the client's experience, and this is something that you'll hear Carl Rogers talk about when we take a look at person-centered therapy. And so this lines up with the idea of advanced empathy. So really empathizing with clients, getting a sense of where they're coming from, conveying to them that you're invested in a collaborative relationship. These are all kinds of things that help to privilege the client's experience. Carl Rogers used the term prize, using like a verb. He prized his clients. It can be a tough thing to describe, but I think the concept is accessible. You want to understand and acknowledge that every person who comes to see you is a special individual, and you want to value them in that way. Requesting feedback in real time. Is this working for you? What do you have to offer to the situation? How is what we're doing working? In real time, but then also looking back to how did this work for you? These things that we did. And on the one hand, the next item seems intuitive. On the other hand, it maybe doesn't. But avoiding critical comments. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute. Does that mean that when someone comes to see us, that everything they do has to be wonderful? How are we going to help them with behavioral change? And it does not mean that. What it does mean, though, is that kind of habitually and as reflected in our communication patterns, we want to avoid being critical. There is a space for gently confronting clients, and sometimes that's our job, to help them see inconsistency between what they're doing and what they think they're doing. But we really want to avoid taking on a critical persona. I mentioned this a little bit ago. We want to demonstrate empathy. We want to really work to understand folks and communicate that understanding. So it's one thing to understand somebody, right? You might be a great judge of character or feel like you have great insight into the way people operate. But in the therapeutic relationship, that's not going to account for too much unless the client, the consumer, perceives that. We want to work with our clients to identify common goals so that you, the client, and the lamppost all know what you're doing, where you're going, and that everyone agrees. I think we'll see in in a slide or two that actually when there's inconsistency between client goals and counselor goals, that can cause real problems. And you just think about miscommunication in regular day-to-day life, and it's pretty easy to see that that could happen in a therapeutic relationship as well. So we really want to make sure that we are on the same page in terms of therapeutic goals. Positive regard, I think I probably hammered on this a bunch. And feedback, I mentioned that a little bit ago. What things do not work? Confrontation. I know I just said that there are times to confront clients, and there most definitely are. But again, we're talking as kind of a baseline behavior, behaviors that typify our relationship. We don't want to be confrontative as sort of our way of being. Negativity is also not helpful. And this does convey to when it's time to confront. It's still never really a great idea to be critical, rejecting, hostile, or blaming. It's probably not a good idea in our regular interpersonal relationships either. Sometimes it's difficult to stay on the straight and narrow path there, but in our therapeutic relationships, we really need to be. We really have a responsibility to avoid negativity towards people who come to see us. We want to avoid assumptions. This is going to help to keep us out of that place where there's inconsistency in goals. And excuse me, also avoiding assumptions refers to just kind of assuming that the therapeutic relationship is going well. You want to check in with folks on that. How is this working for you? It seems like it could be kind of an awkward place to go, and certainly it can be, but there are ways that you can check in with folks, find out how things are going for them with the therapeutic relationship that are natural, and you'll develop some of those skills as you develop as a counselor. Therapist centricity is not a good deal. It is the client's therapy. It is not your therapy or my therapy if I'm the counselor. The client is really the center of what's going on. Being rigid is not necessarily, it was not a beneficial thing. I think it can be good to have an idea of some scaffolding or structure for where things are going to go. But I don't think you want to be overly committed to adhering to that. We need to be able to zig when people need us to zig, and zag when they need us to zag. We really need to be able to tailor the counseling that we provide for folks. And when we see potential ruptures, when the seams don't seem to be lining up just right, it's best to address these things early rather than maybe assuming that certain patterns are going to work themselves out on their own. Because as you might expect, that's not likely to happen. So looking at some specific research findings from the vocational rehabilitation field. So talking to or looking at the outcomes of specific clients and talking to them about their experience in therapy indicated that clients who experienced a stronger working alliance with their rehabilitation counselor actually had higher rates of employment. That's pretty amazing, right? Additionally, the working alliance is related to the client's perception that they're going to be able to be employed, that they're going to get a job. And throughout the program, uh, actually some of my own research is focused on this, the idea of the way that our expectations affect outcome. We'll see that that matters, that if a client believes that he or she can get a job, that has a big impact on whether or not they actually can. And if their relationship with you determines whether or not they believe they can get a job, well, then your relationship is going to be a significant predictor of the actual job. This kind of dynamic was observed in general population voc rehab clients, a large sample that includes a little bit of everybody, and then also in a smaller study focused on folks with mild mental retardation. Intellectual disability is the term we usually use now. And like I said, the full study will be posted up, and you can pretty easily look at this and look at the full study and be able to identify the details if you're interested. So we start to see this dynamic emerge where if folks come to therapy, they have low expectations, or there are discrepancies between what they expect and what actually goes on in therapy, the therapy doesn't go as well. And folks terminate early. I think that makes pretty good sense right on the face of it. So Chan et al., Dr. Chan's actually a old professor of mine, and someone who continues to be a mentor and colleague. He makes the point that discrepancies between counselor and consumer expectation is something that's actually fixed fairly easily. Some of these other areas that we were talking about before can be a little more complicated, but it's, from a technical standpoint, it's pretty easy to get on the same page in terms of what to expect and to give someone a sense of what's going to happen. Kind of low-hanging fruit there, if you will. You don't want to pass up the opportunity of getting as much benefit as you can from things that are pretty easy. So switching from the relationship itself to the therapist, kind of again mirroring our chapters here, the different areas that the book's focused on. What kinds of therapists are more successful than other kinds of therapists? I think I mentioned last week that in fact, individual therapist is a better predictor of outcome than treatment modality. So, for example, if you have two therapists, one of them is more likely to do a better job than the other one pretty consistently, irrespective of whether they're doing cognitive behavioral therapy, solution-focused therapy, or any type of modality. The individual therapist is a strong predictor. So what kind of characteristics do effective therapists have? Well, as you might expect, again, a lot of times just following the simplest idea is going to be the clearest when we're thinking about theories and interventions. The kind of therapist that's going to be the most successful is going to be the kind of therapist who's the best at establishing a good working relationship. We'll talk about some of the soft skills that fuel that in a second here. Additionally, and I think this is good news for everyone, education is a predictor of therapist success. So Frayne et al., Michael Frayne and a colleagues conducted a meta-analysis. That means they looked at a whole bunch of different studies and kind of put them all together as if it was one big study. Take all the data from all these different studies, put it in one pot, and then analyze that data. They found that rehabilitation counselors with master's degrees did much better work than rehabilitation counselors without master's degrees. And you all probably know that not every state requires a master's degree for rehabilitation counselors. So that's how this research is pretty easily done. So your degree is likely to pay dividends for your clients. And furthermore, if they extrapolate out, if you extrapolate out from the results that Frayne et al. Got, they found that approximately 20,000 more people with disabilities every year would have a positive employment outcome if all counselors had master's degrees in rehabilitation. That's pretty powerful stuff. Now, I have to go back and look at the study again firsthand to see how they got to that, because that's a pretty bold claim. But I will say that I know Michael Frayne's work, and he is a serious researcher. So there's he didn't just make this up. So I'm inclined to take it at face value. So in addition to education, therapist positivity and friendliness is consistently associated with good outcome. Avoidance of criticism and hostility is associated with good therapeutic outcomes. Positive relationships, the ability to establish a positive relationship between the therapist and the client, is going to predict a good outcome. These things make pretty good sense, right? I mean, what we've basically said is, more than specific theory, what predicts outcome is the strength of the therapeutic relationship. I think that was probably the first thing I said to you guys. And then part two is, therapists that can establish a good relationship are the most successful therapists. And really everything after that, to some extent, is window dressing. I'm exaggerating a little bit. I'm somebody who likes the intricacy of theories, but really at the center of it, it's this therapeutic alliance stuff, and that it does vary from person to person. So therapists who mirror positive behaviors and don't mirror negative behaviors to their clients are going to have better outcomes. Therapists who are just fundamentally good at relating to other people, at showing warmth, at being affirmative, and avoiding temptations to kind of move into an attack and blame mode, these folks are going to do better work than folks who aren't able to develop those skills. And we talked about this a second ago. Therapists who are flexible are going to have good outcomes. So again, it's not really complicated, the ideas that we're talking about today, nor in our textbooks. Fairly straightforward. Therapeutic alliance is the biggest predictor of success. That's message number one. Message number two is, therapists who are good at developing a therapeutic alliance are successful therapists. And message number three is that those characteristics that make you the kind of therapist that's good at developing a therapeutic alliance, those are characteristics that can be acquired, that can be worked on, that can be practiced. So you put it all together, it's a pretty optimistic conclusion. And again, we're still at the really beginning of our content. We're building a firm firm foundation for when we take steps to look into the specific theories themselves and see how they fit into these kind of basic skill ideas. And then in just a few weeks, we'll be seeing you on campus to practice stuff. All right. Again, I hope you all have a good weekend. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Take care.